The rain pattered against the windows of Café Lumière, one of those upscale establishments nestled in the heart of West Hollywood where celebrities often retreated for a moment of normalcy. The kind of place where an unspoken agreement existed between patrons: everyone deserves their privacy, even the famous. 22-year-old James Thornton had been working at Café Lumière for only 3 weeks. A film school student with mounting student loans, he had landed the job after his previous gig at a bookstore had fallen through when the place closed down. The café job paid better, but the clientele was far more demanding. Every mistake felt magnified under the scrutiny of people who were accustomed to perfection in their service. On this particular Wednesday morning, James was running on 4 hours of sleep after staying up to finish an assignment for his screenplay class. His fingers trembled slightly as he balanced the tray of drinks destined for table 7. Among the café's patrons that morning, seated alone at a corner table with a dog-eared script and a pen, was Margot Robbie. The Australian actress had slipped in almost unnoticed, wearing a baseball cap and minimal makeup. She'd ordered a simple black coffee and avocado toast, smiling warmly at James when he took her order. He had recognized her immediately but maintained his professional composure, treating her with the same courtesy he would any other customer. 2 tables away sat Gregory Palmer, a mid-level entertainment executive known among the staff for his impatience and condescension. His voice always carried a little too loudly across the café as he conducted business calls, making sure everyone knew exactly how important he was. James delivered Palmer's order, a complex arrangement of a specific temperature pour-over coffee, a precisely cooked egg white omelette, and gluten-free toast with a particular brand of almond butter that the café kept stocked specifically for particular customers like him. "Your coffee and breakfast, sir," James said, carefully setting down the items. Palmer looked up from his phone call long enough to wave dismissively, indicating James should leave the items without interrupting his conversation. James nodded and retreated, moving on to his next table. He was making good progress on his morning shift until 15 minutes later when Palmer's voice cut through the ambient café noise. "Waiter! Waiter!" James turned, seeing Palmer gesturing impatiently. He hurried over. "Yes, sir. Is everything all right?" Palmer held up his coffee cup with disdain. "This coffee is cold. Completely undrinkable. I specifically asked for it at 155 degrees. This is nowhere near that." "I'm so sorry, sir. The barista prepared it according to your specifications, but I'd be happy to." "Do you know who I am?" Palmer cut him off, his voice rising. "I come here 3 times a week. I spend enough money in this establishment to pay your salary for a month. And you bring me cold coffee?" James felt his face growing hot with embarrassment as other patrons began to look their way. "Sir, I apologize. I'll get you a fresh cup immediately." "That's not the point." Palmer stood up now, towering over James. "The point is the incompetence. I shouldn't have to ask twice for something so simple. Your generation has no concept of proper service. Maybe if you spent less time on your phone and more time paying attention, you'd be able to do your job correctly." James stood frozen, clutching his serving tray against his chest like a shield. His mind raced with the right words to defuse the situation without making it worse. "Is everything all right here?" The café manager, Diane, had appeared, alerted by the commotion. Palmer turned his ire toward her. "Your staff is completely untrained. This coffee is ice cold. I've been coming here for years, and the service has never been this abysmal." Diane nodded, adopting the placating tone reserved for difficult customers. "I understand, Mr. Palmer. We'll get you a fresh cup right away, on the house of course." James could feel his job slipping away. 3 weeks in, and he was already causing scenes with regular customers. His rent was due in 10 days. His mind calculated how long his meager savings would last if he got fired today. "Actually," a calm voice interrupted, "I think the coffee might be perfectly fine." All heads turned to see Margot Robbie standing beside their table, her script left behind at her own. She smiled, but her eyes held a steadiness that commanded attention. "Excuse me?" Palmer said, momentarily thrown off by the actress's intervention. "I said, perhaps the coffee is fine," Margot repeated, her Australian accent slightly more pronounced now. "Maybe it's your anger that's making it feel cold." A few patrons stifled laughs. Palmer's face flushed. "Miss Robbie, with all due respect, this doesn't concern you," he said, recognizing her despite his agitation. "I think it does concern me when someone is being publicly humiliated for something that isn't their fault," she replied. She turned to James. "I've been watching. You delivered his order promptly. The coffee was steaming when you brought it over. Mr." She glanced at Palmer's table where his business card sat next to his phone. Palmer here was on a 15-minute phone call before he even touched his cup. Palmer sputtered, That's not. Maybe instead of blaming this young man, you could consider that coffee naturally cools down when left untouched," Margot continued. She turned to the other café patrons. "Did anyone else here receive cold coffee today?" Heads shook around the room. A few murmurs of "my coffee was perfect" and "always great here" floated through the air. Palmer's face had gone from red to purple. Being publicly corrected by Margot Robbie while an audience of onlookers silently sided with her was clearly not how he had expected his morning to go. "Do you know who I am?" he repeated, this time directing the question at Margot. She smiled, somehow both sweet and steel-edged. "I don't, actually. But I know who he is." She gestured to James. "He's someone doing his job well under difficult circumstances. And I think that deserves respect, not public humiliation." By now, several patrons had discreetly taken out their phones, recording the exchange. Palmer noticed this and seemed to deflate slightly, aware that he was potentially moments away from becoming an internet pariah. "I think I'll take my business elsewhere," he finally muttered, throwing several bills on the table and grabbing his briefcase. "That's probably best," Margot agreed pleasantly. "Have a wonderful day." As Palmer stormed out, the café erupted in scattered applause. James stood stunned, unsure what had just happened. Diane squeezed his shoulder supportively before returning to the kitchen. Margot turned to him. "I'm sorry that happened to you." Thank you," James managed. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she replied simply. "No one deserves to be spoken to that way." She glanced around at the other patrons, most of whom were now trying to pretend they weren't watching. "And you might want to tell those folks to stop filming now." James nodded, grateful. But it was too late. By evening, clips of the encounter had spread across social media platforms. The video showed Margot Robbie standing up for an unnamed server against a Hollywood bully. Hashtags like #MargotDefendsWaiter and #ColdCoffeeKarma were trending. James arrived at work the next morning with a sense of dread. Although many customers had expressed support for him after yesterday's incident, he wasn't sure how management would view the viral moment. Café Lumière prided itself on discretion and providing a safe haven for celebrity clientele away from cameras and public scrutiny. He was surprised when Diane called him into the office before his shift began. "Have you seen the videos?" she asked, gesturing to her computer screen where one of the clips was playing, already at several million views. "Yes," James admitted. "I'm so sorry about that. I didn't mean to cause a scene or bring that kind of attention to the café." Diane leaned back in her chair. "Are you kidding? Our phone has been ringing off the hook. Reservations have tripled. Everyone wants to visit the café where Margot Robbie defended the nice waiter." She smiled. "And Mr. Palmer? He's been a nightmare customer for years. We've had 3 servers quit because of him alone." James blinked, confused. "So? I'm not fired?" "Fired? No. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about a promotion." "A promotion?" "To shift supervisor." Helen is leaving next month for graduate school, and will need someone to take her place. After seeing how you handled yourself yesterday, staying professional even when being verbally attacked, I think you'd be perfect for the role." James could hardly believe what he was hearing. "That's a very generous offer, but I've only been here 3 weeks." "Sometimes 3 weeks is enough to see someone's character," Diane replied. "The pay increase would be about $4 an hour. Would that interest you?" $4 more per hour would mean an extra $640 a month, enough to ease his constant financial anxiety and maybe even start building a small cushion of savings. "Yes," he said. "That would interest me very much." "Good. Helen will start training you next week." Diane stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. "Oh, and one more thing. You have a visitor." James stepped out of the office, confused. Standing by the counter, chatting amiably with one of the baristas, was Margot Robbie. When she saw him, she waved him over. "Hi," she said when he approached. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to check that you were okay after yesterday." "I'm more than okay," James said, still processing the promotion news. "They're actually making me a shift supervisor because of how I handled it." "That's wonderful." Her smile was genuine. "I was worried I might have made things difficult for you." "Not at all. Actually, I wanted to thank you properly. What you did yesterday, no one's ever stood up for me like that before." She shrugged. "I've been on film sets where I've seen people in power mistreat those they perceive as beneath them. I promised myself I'd never stay silent when I witnessed it." She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Listen, I came for another reason too. My production company is looking for interns this summer. Diane mentioned you're a film student?" James nodded, speechless. "Well, if you're interested, send your resume to this email. Tell them I referred you." She handed him the card. "No guarantees, but they'll definitely look at your application." I don't know what to say." "Say you'll apply," she replied with a grin. "And that you'll keep standing tall even when difficult people try to make you feel small." After she left, James stood holding the business card, reading the embossed company name over and over. His hands shook slightly, but this time, it wasn't from exhaustion or anxiety, it was from possibility. 3 months later, James balanced a tray of coffees as he made his way through the bustling production office. As a production assistant intern, coffee runs weren't officially part of his job description, but he volunteered anyway. The skills he'd learned at Café Lumiere, efficiency, attention to detail, memorizing complex orders, served him well in this new environment. He still worked weekend shifts at the café, partly because he needed the money and partly out of loyalty to Diane and the team that had supported him. The cold coffee incident, as it was now called, had faded from social media attention, replaced by newer viral moments and celebrity encounters. But for James, its impact remained transformative. The video had captured a moment when someone with influence had used it not for personal gain, but to correct an injustice. In an industry often criticized for its superficiality, he had witnessed genuine character. As he distributed the coffees to various staff members, his phone buzzed with a text from his screenplay professor: "Your revised script is impressive. Sending it to my contact at Sundance as we discussed." James smiled to himself. He'd completely rewritten his screenplay after the cafe incident, changing its focus from a cynical take on fame to a more nuanced exploration of power, kindness, and how small moments of courage can alter life's trajectory. He had titled it, Cold Coffee. At the end of the hallway, he saw Margot in animated discussion with another producer. She caught his eye and gave him a quick wink before returning to her conversation. In that moment, James realized something profound. In an industry built on pretending to be other people, the most valuable skill might be remembering how to be genuinely human. As for Gregory Palmer, the executive who'd berated him that rainy morning, James had encountered him twice since starting his internship. Both times, Palmer had avoided eye contact, clearly recognizing him but choosing not to acknowledge their previous interaction. James didn't mind. He had learned that success in Hollywood wasn't just about who you impressed, but also about who you inspired. And sometimes, that journey began with something as simple as a cup of coffee that had grown cold while someone was too busy being important to notice. The story of The Waitress Defender followed Margot Robbie for weeks after the incident. In interviews promoting her latest film, journalists inevitably asked about it. Rather than using these moments to polish her public image, she consistently redirected attention to the broader issue. "What happened that day happens to service workers every day," she would say. "The only difference is that most don't have someone with a recognizable face to intervene. We should all be doing that for each other." When asked if she had stayed in touch with the waiter, she was deliberately vague, protecting James's privacy while the media interest remained high. "He's doing very well," she would say with a knowing smile. Sometimes standing up for what's right creates ripples we never anticipated. Those ripples continued to spread. The Café Lumière incident spawned a social media challenge where people shared stories of standing up for service workers or others in vulnerable positions. Celebrities and influencers participated, but so did thousands of ordinary people who had been inspired to intervene when they witnessed someone being mistreated. For James, watching this unfold was surreal. He had gone from being nearly invisible, just another struggling student trying to make ends meet, to being at the center of a cultural moment, even if most people didn't know his name. 6 months after the incident, he submitted his screenplay, Cold Coffee, to several competitions. It reached the finals in 2 of them and caught the attention of a junior agent at a mid-sized talent agency. The script wasn't autobiographical exactly, he had fictionalized many elements and created a completely different ending, but its emotional core rang true. On the anniversary of the incident, Café Lumière held a special event they called Kindness Day, offering free coffee to customers who shared stories of unexpected kindness they had experienced or witnessed. James, now working full-time in production while developing his own projects on the side, returned to the café as a guest of honor. As he addressed the small crowd gathered for the event, he looked around at the familiar space where his life had changed course. "A year ago, I was standing right over there," he pointed to the spot where he had faced Palmer's wrath, "feeling like my world was collapsing over something as simple as a cup of coffee. What I didn't realize then was that sometimes our lowest moments become doorways to unexpected opportunities." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Someone asked me recently what the most important thing is that I've learned from all this. I think it's that in a world where we're all rushing from one thing to the next, taking a moment to truly see each other, to stand up for each other, that's what matters. That's what changes lives." Mine certainly was changed. As applause filled the café, James caught sight of a familiar face slipping in through the back entrance. Margot gave him a small nod of encouragement, staying at the periphery of the gathering, letting this be his moment. Later, as the crowd thinned, she approached him with 2 cups of coffee. "I made sure they're still hot," she said with a grin, handing him one. "Thanks for coming," James replied. "And for staying somewhat in the shadows. I appreciate it. This is your story now," she said simply. "I just happened to be there at the beginning." They sat at a corner table, the same one she had occupied a year earlier with her dog-eared script. James had since learned it had been for a film that went on to earn her another Oscar nomination. "I heard your screenplay got optioned," she said. "Congratulations." James nodded, still somewhat in disbelief about this latest development. "A small production company. Very independent. But they get the vision. And the title? Still, Cold Coffee?" "Actually, we changed it," James admitted. "The new title is, Perhaps It's Your Anger. Inspired by what you actually said that day." Margot laughed. "Much better title. More intriguing." They talked for an hour about the industry, about storytelling, about the projects they were passionate about. Not once did she adopt the condescending tone that some established professionals used with newcomers. She spoke to him as a colleague, as someone with valuable ideas and perspectives. As they were saying goodbye, she hesitated. "Can I offer one piece of advice? From someone who's been in this industry a while longer?" "Of course," James said. "Don't let this story define you forever. It's a wonderful beginning, but you have so many more stories to tell." She smiled. "I look forward to seeing what they are." As James watched her leave the café, he considered how differently things might have gone if she had chosen to mind her own business that rainy morning. If she had stayed silent, absorbed in her script, letting an unkind moment pass unchallenged. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the pavement. James stepped out into the light, feeling its warmth on his face. He had coffee to drink, pages to write, and a future that had expanded beyond anything he could have imagined, all because someone had decided that kindness was worth the momentary discomfort of speaking up. And if there was any lesson worth carrying forward from his unexpected journey, it was that. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes. Also don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.